This event, Carrington, flash of white light in a telescope, sky turns red, telegraphs sizzle, is the equivalent of enough electricity to power all of the U.S. today for 1 million years.
In 1859, a powerful solar storm known as the Carrington Event hit the world, disrupting early technology in a shocking way and giving us future humans a glimpse into the potential danger presented when the face of the sun itself actually flares up. Our guest today is Ben Bradford, host of the podcast Are We Doomed?, a show that investigates the greatest risks facing our society, our planet, and our species, while also asking whether the threat is real or hyped up and how we can make it out alive. For this episode, he tells me about what happened during the Carrington Event, teaches me the science around solar storms, and explains how they have affected us in the modern era. Together, we discuss whether these celestial circumstances are something to panic about, and if they are, what we can do to prepare for yet another baffling calamity. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to welcome our guest today to the show, who has brought a topic that's been on my mind, and it's pretty niche. So it's fun for this topic to kind of come to me and get an opportunity to bring it to all of you. So Ben, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so our shows, yours being Are We Doomed? We have the same, I think, basic mission in mind of sorting out some of the more sensationalized tales of danger from the actual things that we need to be worrying about and planning for.
Absolutely.
Your show's, the beginning description, which I love, is the world ending, or does it just feel like it? So I'm interested in how you came to the decision to create a show that is about analyzing these like massive risks to humanity, like these fears of the end of the world, whether they be, true or false or, overblown. So what brought you to this?
It's funny because I had spent maybe 5 years doing political history reporting and doing these narrative documentary series that, you have a year and you do 7 episodes, and it's kind of this great luxury. And I'd been looking at past presidential races, and thematically it was about like what shaped our current moment. And I think it's natural to then look at like, okay, what's next? Where are we going? And I was pretty burnt out on doing politics and that vein of history. But I also was thinking a lot about just this question of what is real? What are the pressing things? What are the ones that are only in our minds? Mm-hmm. And, we're all flooded with information all the time with, the shouting voices of our algorithms that are saying, hey, look at me, get my attention. And, as you cover, there's so much hysteria.
Yeah.
But the big stuff that matters really matters. Your nuclear wars, your climate changes, the potential for big pandemics. Right. These are things that are on the lists of these organizations, that some of them that for decades have tracked what are called existential risks or global catastrophic risks. And so I was thinking about all of that. But also, you're doing a new show, and you got to figure out, how do you make it so people, and also me, you're not just bummed out all the time?
Yes, good question.
Yeah. And so part of it is looking at these things through a lens of curiosity, being able to look at nuclear war and being like, it is real. It's also really embarrassing.
Yeah.
And being able to explore why it's embarrassing. And I think that also demystifies it a little bit. And then, of course, to look at things where it's like, okay, the Yellowstone supervolcano, is it going to explode? No, we're fine. Mm-hmm. We're good. Mm-hmm. We don't have to worry about it. And it's interesting. It's real, but it's not going to explode. And so that is very helpful and comforting to me. So that's sort of like how it came about, as I was thinking about the stuff that I'd done and where I wanted to go. I was thinking about, how I'd cover the past, and I wanted to see what the future was. And I was interested in the big stuff. I was interested in our information. I was interested in hysteria. And I wanted to know, are we doomed?
Absolutely. I definitely relate to pretty much everything that you just said in terms of our show. And you definitely have like a great vein of humor that goes through what you do. And, I think it's so important to figure out ways to present information in a way that can be digestible to people, because otherwise, it's just difficult to transmit without those very human needs of what you're talking about. So, I highly recommend your show to our listeners for sure.
Thank you. I was wondering if what I described sounded to you like when you were first thinking up your show, if you had any flashbacks.
Oh, yeah. And I think this is so interesting to me, too, because as our listeners know, there were parts of my upbringing that had a little bit of the prepper mindset attached to them. I remain a little bit of a prepper myself. I am definitely I have a doomsday strain within me for sure. And so I love this as also a human person who has, struggled with some catastrophic thinking and some planning for that I do think is important. And I'm sure we'll get into that. So if you don't mind me going on a tangent very quickly.
Please. Love a tangent.
So you came to me, or rather, your show kind of came to me and presented a few possible topics that we could talk about. And one of them is what I chose that we're talking about today, which is this big solar storm that happened in the 1800s and how the world reacted to having this new form of communication, the telegraph, and electricity also being kind of taken out for a bit there. And I'd never heard of this, but I was recently speaking to my prepper mindset in this great program that I'm going to advertise to everyone called the Community Emergency Response Team Training, which FEMA puts on all over the country. And you learn how to react in a natural or man-made disaster. You learn basic medical, basic firefighting, search and rescue, crowd psychology. And it's this really fantastic program, 30 hours. And, it's like if we all just took this course and we all had this basic information, we would be prepared to help each other when things got really bad. And so I love doing that. But I met a man in there who was very cargo pants with 700 pockets filled with all kinds of different gadgets, who I loved. Shout out to Eric. And he told me about this event, this Carrington event, and talked about solar storms and taught me about Faraday bags and how to protect from this. And at first I was kind of like, this really does sound like conspiracy stuff, solar storms, right? Yeah. But then I started reading about it and I was like, oh man, this is a real, maybe very uncommon, but very real thing. So that was only a couple months ago. So you coming to me with this obscure thing was pretty exciting to me. So I think maybe you can decide where we start talking about this story. What is your in point for this?
I will start by saying that I had a very similar experience to you.
Really?
Where I think that a lot of the stuff that I have covered so far in this short life of my show so far has fallen into two buckets. There's sort of the big threats that turn out to be real, and we have generally heard about them. Nuclear war, climate change, AI is often put on that list now. We've all heard of AI. Pandemics. These are the big four that most places kind of put on their list. We also have big galactic stuff that happens on really, really long time scales. Asteroids, supervolcanoes, things like that.
Sure.
And then I had known something about solar storms. At some point, I don't remember when it entered my radar, I had this phrase, the Carrington Event, in my brain, but I didn't know much beyond that. And then I started digging into it. And it's sort of the same thing you described, where it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel like it falls into either of these buckets necessarily. It doesn't feel like it's, one that's really well known that we're all like, oh yeah, we got to watch out for solar storms. Right. And in particular, this particular super solar storm. we're not also talking about the kind of time scale where you're like, well, it happens every million years and, civilization has been around for a few thousand years. So your odds mathematically are pretty decent that it's not going to happen in your lifetime or over the course of your nation or your civilization or whatever. So with that, maybe I will tell you a little bit of the story.
I would love that.
In 1859, a British astronomer, Richard Carrington, he is someone who draws sunspots. So he's basically got his telescope and he's staring at the sun and he's sketching the sunspots on them. And all of a sudden he sees this flash of white that covers the telescope lens. And he calls out, it's morning on this day in 1859, and he calls out and says, hey, someone come look at this, see what I'm seeing. And no one's there because it's lunchtime. It's like 11 a.m. and I guess that's lunchtime. And so no one else is around to see it. There is another astronomer elsewhere in the world who also sees it at the same time. Let's skip ahead.
Okay.
Because basically we have this weird flash of white on the sun. No big deal.
Which wouldn't have been visible to anyone but people looking through a telescope.
Yeah, unless you were an astronomer staring at the sun through a telescope and deciding to sketch it.
Got it.
And being like, man, I didn't bring white for this. So that night, about 17 hours later, the sky turns red in huge portions of the world. And we can talk more about how huge.
Sure.
But the sky turns red in the United States, in England, in Sweden, and Switzerland. People start getting up. They don't have watches. The church bells start ringing.
Yeah.
Miners get their pickaxes and start going into work. Farmers get up. It's 1 a.m.
Wow.
Then the telegraph machines, which are the major communication technology, they run on through power lines on electric power with batteries. Not very much because they just have a little beep. But something weird starts to happen. They start to chatter, some of them. Some people who are telegraph operators realize that even when they unplug them, they can still connect and talk to other people around the world, even though the telegraphs are unplugged.
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah, some of them are just going off by themselves.
Wow.
Just indecipherable chattering. And so you can imagine at this time, the sky is red. The telegraphs are chattering. Some of them start to spark. Some of them start to light on fire. Some telegraph stations burn down.
Jeez.
And people are like, what is happening?
It's like an end is nigh level event.
100%.
Yeah.
And so what I think is weird to me is that then people kind of forgot about it.
Wow.
Like,
that's amazing.
That was kind of it. It was like, well, that was weird. And there's all these newspaper stories about the sky turning red and, this thing happened or this telegraph machine was on the fritz or this person was able to connect to another person. But that was it.
It didn't have the hysteria maybe that you would expect from an event like that.
I don't know that there was a long tail to it.
Sure.
Right? Like when you go back and you sort of look at the articles about it, it does feel like it was kind of shrugged off.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think is probably the case is that electricity was so new that the idea that it would go on the fritz in that weird way was maybe less spooky at the time than it is now.
Yeah.
I am sure that there were people who thought the end times are here. I am sure. I mean, how could there not be? That there were people at the time who thought, like, this is the heavens or the demons speaking to us, right? Oh, it's witchcraft. Or, I am sure that was the case.
But it does speak to kind of the time a little bit that didn't happen because we're really in this age of invention. We are not in the witch trial era anymore.
Correct.
I think people were able to not panic religiously the way that they, I think, absolutely would have in maybe the 1600s. And I think of like the spiritualists at that time. We talk about the spiritualists a lot who were, talking to ghosts, and often the telegraph could be involved in that. So I bet there were some spiritualists thinking that ghosts were controlling the lines there for at least a little bit.
What I was really interested in for like our perspective was, does anyone stop to say, wait a minute, do we need to do something differently with how we're building this technology?
Sure.
And The answer seems to be no. I mean, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Right? We just kind of keep doing it. So you repair your telegraph machines and you kind of keep doing it because you're already experimenting with how does this stuff work, and that's how they built it.
Right.
And so, it is a really interesting, fascinating, weird thing that happened.
Right.
And the way I like to do this now is to sort of like flip around and say, okay, well, what's actually happening? What was causing this? What was this thing in reality? And so we go back to that flash of white light on the sun. That is a white light solar flare.
Okay.
The sun is a plasma. I mean, it's a lot more than that. But it's superheated gas, and it rotates. It rotates like Earth rotates, except it doesn't rotate like Earth rotates in the sense that because it's not solid, the whole thing doesn't rotate, together.
Sure.
So the poles of the sun actually rotate at a different speed than like the middle of the sun. And so you can imagine that the whole thing is sort of twisting. And there are these magnetic fields that arc across the sun. And I am not a scientist, and my eyes kind of roll back in my head when we start doing these things. But our guest in our episode is the chief scientist, the former chief scientist of NASA.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, who's really interesting. So he's trying to explain this to me, and you can hear like my brain exploding. But if you think about the way that the sun is kind of rotating, you think about these magnetic fields. The metaphor everybody uses is rubber bands. It's like if the magnetic fields are rubber bands, they're getting all twisted up as the sun's different sections of it rotate at different speeds. And occasionally these magnetic fields snap like rubber bands.
Okay.
And that's where we get a lot of solar activity. That's where we get like sunspots. That's where we get this white light solar flare, particularly big snap. But not only that, this is like a snap that catches a piece of the sun's skin.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's like almost like a catapult, right? It's like you pull back a rubber band. It's a really heavy duty rubber band, and it takes some of your skin with you when you break it, and the whole thing snaps back. In this case, it's the sun. We're talking, millions of tons of sun getting launched into space. And it's like kind of this shotgun blast that expands out, and it's traveling at, tens of thousands of kilometers. I think it's 25,000 kilometers a second. Anyway, the point is it's 90 million miles to the sun from here.
Okay.
It takes it 17 hours to cross that distance.
Wow. And
it slams into us. This is called a coronal mass ejection, which is like a really boring scientific academic term until you think about what it means.
Okay.
Coronal mass ejection. That's like piece of sun catapulted.
I mean, that sounds very scary.
It's not great.
No, I don't love it.
The thing is, this in and of itself doesn't do the thing that happened on the ground that freaked people out.
Okay.
The sun is always like coughing stuff at us. It's hostile and friendly. It keeps us alive, but there are consequences.
Sure.
And so the sun is always spitting magnetic particles and, radioactive particles at us. And the only reason that we're around is that the Earth is an amazing thing and has a protective field around us that shoots a lot of that stuff away, which is our magnetic field. So we have this liquid metal sloshing inside the Earth, on the outer core, and that is essentially generating this magnetic field. It's funny, it works like the same way that like a dynamo in a car works. And I don't know how that works either, but it works the same way. So I don't know how either of those things work, but they work the same way.
All right.
And so the Earth generates this magnetic field. So the coronal mass ejections can hit other forms of, it's called space weather, which is a funny name for it. And so they'll hit our magnetic field. The magnetic field sort of absorbs them. It kind of gets battered and it'll kind of squeeze down. And it's depending on the level of impact, depending on certain other things, like it gets like more complicated than this, but we will not get into it. The level of impact can differ. But the way I think about it is it's almost like a bruise. It's like it's like getting hit and the magnetic field gets squeezed and then our atmosphere sort of puffs up. And all of this stuff like creates basically a churning in the atmosphere. And that creates an electrical current going through the atmosphere. And that electrical current is essentially looking for places to go, and it goes through the Earth, and it goes through other things that are very conductive. And as we built electrical technology, a thing that's really conductive is the thing that we built to conduct the electricity.
To conduct, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Which is the power lines. So the stat that we heard from another person we interviewed who works for the government predicting and watching and doing meteorology for space weather is that this event, Carrington,
Mm-hmm.
flash of white light in the telescope, sky turns red, telegraphs sizzle, is the equivalent of enough electricity to power all the U.S. today for 1 million years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Which seems like a lot.
And I want to just shout out to you for that science lesson. I feel very much like I'm in the presence of a Bill Nye right now. I'm impressed. I want to do a Ben. It's very good.
That's very flattering.
Yeah, I'm flattering
I just want to reiterate that I'm a journalist and I have no scientific degrees. I am explaining what was explained to me, and my head really hurts even trying to explain it.
You did great.
Thank you.
More after this. And now, back to the show. Now we're back on Earth. Where do we go next?
This electrical current shoots through, and it hits all the power lines. I would say there's two things. One thing that's really interesting and is going to matter is this byproduct that we all know, but I don't know about you, but for me, I didn't know that this is what it was, and that's the Northern Lights.
I've seen them, but I don't know what they are now.
You've seen them?
Yeah, well, they came to Seattle recently, or we were able to see them from Seattle. So, and I saw them. Is that right? Are those the Northern Lights?
Yeah.
Okay.
A couple years ago, right?
Yeah. It was awesome. It was really cool.
Yeah. So what you were watching was a geomagnetic storm, which is that a coronal mass ejection from the sun got launched, hit Earth's magnetic field, the field shuddered, this current was generated, and it creates these curtains of light, which is the Northern Lights.
Wow.
And so the reason you can usually see the Northern Lights is because that's just sort of the Earth's magnetic field being battered by typical sun. And when it goes further down, that is because the storm is more severe.
Okay.
So in 2024, when you could see it in Seattle and my parents in Northern California could see it but didn't because they went to sleep instead, that was because it was a more severe solar storm.
Okay.
And so I actually think that's sort of the next place to go, because the Carrington Event in 1859 is this weird blip of history that happened, this weird 2 days where the sky turned red and some things fizzled and people were kind of like, huh, and then kind of kept living their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But 20 years after that, Thomas Edison, light bulb. 20 years after that, you're in 1900 and you've got streetcars and you've got movie theaters,
right,
and you've got now thousands of power plants around the country. And, 20 years after that, you can kind of just keep going as people build more electrical technology. And I think the question is, well, did we see this again?
Sure.
And we did, right? Not to a Carrington level, but in 1921, a railroad control tower in the middle of New York City explodes, bursts into flames. Radios crackled during World War II and whispered white noise, ethereal voices. Troops thought it was an enemy psyop,
Whoa.
Basically the equivalent of hacking at the time. We're being messed with. It wasn't. It was the sun. It was this process of, sun firing thing, hitting the magnetic field, current being generated, weird stuff happening. And you can keep doing that. There was a Cold War nuclear scare where essentially the sensors went offline. This is the thing that we hear about from our government person in this. And I don't know that story quite as well, but just she mentions it. And it's interesting. There were some sea mines in Vietnam during the Vietnam War that blew up from the sun because of just essentially the way that this current interacts with our technology. And so sort of throughout history, there are these moments where one of these storms hits and weird stuff happens, but never to the level that we saw in 1859, where around the world, this technology was disrupted.
So was it just that small couple days, or did this extend in any way out to a longer period of time? Was it really just that short, small stint there? Wow. And I love the Telegraph. I love the history of the Telegraph. I think it's so interesting. And I feel like it comes up a lot, obviously, because it was such a baffling invention, really. I mean, the first time you could really communicate with someone who was, out of earshot in earnest. And, people call it the Victorian internet. And I think that that's a really apt comparison because this was, I mean, it was a technology that changed everything about the human experience, I think. And so I just think it's so fascinating that in a moment that technology was gone. And it sounds like it didn't cause this mass hysteria. Because from what I've seen, sometimes that's the story in like a War of the Worlds way, that like people were panicking and there was all of this, stampeding terror. But it sounds like maybe because it was new and people were expecting things to kind of fail, that they were able to react to it in a way that we wouldn't necessarily expect. Because I think if that happened today, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that would not be the case. And maybe it just has to do with not being quite reliant. Well, tell me what you think.
Well, okay. What if the internet went out for 9 hours?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that's not a big deal.
I mean, we've had this in the past. We have a separate episode where we try to kill the internet. We're just like saying, like, can we do it? What would happen? And we get these experts to talk through how to do it.
Yeah.
It's very hard. But we also look at like what it would mean.
Sure.
And if it were to go out for a really prolonged period of time, you can imagine it would be really bad.
Yeah.
Especially for our shows. And also for like drinking water, because water treatment centers are often network connected and vulnerable to hacking and what have you. And so like there's some real wild effects. I mean, just the degree to which people rely on GPS. And GPS is not internet, but the maps that show you where you are via the GPS are internet. The point being, in early 2010s in Arizona, the internet went out all across northern Arizona, and people were without it for, I think it was 9 hours, half a day, something like that. So they didn't have access to anything, because what had happened was a cable had been cut. People wanted the copper wire. They cut into this big cable that feeds internet to the whole region, and it happened to be this vulnerability. Or like in Tonga, there was a volcano actually that tore through the undersea internet cable that delivers internet to Tonga, and they were out for a couple of weeks. And it's like, that was bad, It had some real inconveniences, some real problems. But I think like, yeah, we're kind of like, okay, I understand that it's out. I do think that the like weird nature of this is really shocking. I don't fully know why it has a bigger effect at the time on the ground. And it may be that I'm a little bit too zoomed out for that particular 2-week period where people are like, what just happened to our telegraphs? But even the news articles that are about it are frequently about, telegraphs were interrupted, because not all of them were sparking and smoking.
Right.
Some of them were. Their batteries were getting overcharged. But it just sort of happened, and then it stopped happening. But there are newspaper articles that are about it, and that really matters for this other reason that I can talk about.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Let's hear.
So for me, at least, I don't know about you, for you, Chelsey, but for me, like the natural next question is, do we need to be worried about this? Right?
Yeah.
Is this a problem for us now? And there's sort of two factors. One is, can it happen again? And if so, kind of on what time frame are we talking about here? Are we talking about like a 1 in a million, thing, or are we talking about something that's much more frequent? And then the other is our technology, which is a little bit better than the telegraph, also somehow more protected?
Sure.
And so I've told you the story of some of these later incidents where our electric technology kept getting fried in 1921, during World War II, during the Vietnam War. And it was like, oh, our electricity doesn't seem to be that much better. On the other hand, we didn't have a massive blackout the way that we've had in the past until 1989.
Ooh, okay.
And if we're talking about hysteria, again, this is really interesting to think about, because in 1989, there was the biggest solar storm that we've had since Carrington.
Whoa.
And it did all the same stuff. Thing fired from the sun, hit the Earth's magnetic field, squeezed the atmosphere, generated an electrical current. Current sought power lines. Canada is particularly vulnerable to this for, again, I'm not a geologist, but there's something about the rock, in addition to the way that, there's a reason that the northern lights are up there as well. So just in terms of how the Earth's magnetic field operates. So electricity blasted through the electric grid in Quebec and knocked it out. And all of Quebec's power was knocked out in the middle of Canadian winter. It was, well below freezing. for 9 hours, but all of it for 9 hours. In New Jersey, a transformer went up in smoke. Big, costly part of the electric grid. That storm was not as powerful as Carrington.
Okay.
But it is interesting because two things happened in Quebec. It did raise alarms. Like if you go back and look at news articles at the time, people are like, what are we doing here? Like, why is this possible?
Yeah.
And it kicked off some concern, but clearly, it didn't start cults.
Right.
And, obviously the information of the time is different, but it's not something that most of us know about today even.
No, I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was 6, I think, at the time. So I don't remember. I wasn't living in Quebec, mind you, but
sure.
I was on the East Coast, so if New Jersey's transformer was frying, I don't know if that 6-year-old would hear about it. But yeah, I think that these are like very under the radar things.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Yeah. And because even more for me than thinking about the electricity being knocked out is, at least in the case of the Carrington event, you didn't mention this for the 1989 event, but the sky lighting up in the middle of the night, turning red, and, people thinking it's day. And then it sounds like, miners just were like, no, I guess it's not day. They just kind of went back inside. But I mean, it's like, if that happened today, there is a subset of the population that I do think would maybe attribute that to something spiritual or something that feels more doomsday-esque. I'm not saying it would be the majority, but that to me is a little bit more frightening than losing power, because we lose power, right? If it was only for a few hours, then we were like trying to gather information. We're probably assuming, oh, the power's out or the internet's out. But when the sky turns red in the middle of the night, that's some cult stuff right there. I feel like that could birth a cult.
You're absolutely right. And actually, I should mention that even at the time, particularly because Richard Carrington published his thing, and this other guy who didn't get it named after him because people read Carrington's first, published his thing, there was belief at the time that, hey, it's probably the sun. And we don't understand the mechanism, but we think this is related to the sun. Mm-hmm. So even at the time, there was that belief.
Sure.
And that was being spread. And I think you're absolutely right that today, who knows what we would see on, social media? Who knows the conspiratorial YouTube videos you'd be watching about the time the sky turned red and what it means and how it relates to your horoscope.
Right. That's so true. So I'm a big newspapers.com person. I spend a lot of time in the archives. I'm imagining that that's a part of your work as well.
Yes.
Were there any standout newspaper reactions that you saw from the Carrington event specifically? What was the vibe from the papers? Were they explaining this scientifically? Were they just kind of telling the stories of the day of what happened? Or what did you see?
The thing that's funny is that most of the newspapers of the time, they're just reporting on the aurora.
Okay.
Right? Because most of these stories are in places where it's like, okay, the telegraph was disrupted for a little bit. Maybe your telegraph didn't go on fire. Mm-hmm. They're so, okay. Here's one from the Baltimore Sun. There's a really great site.
Okay. That's
solarstorms.org. And I don't know who runs it, but I have checked the newspapers and I have found that they're they seem pretty above board. I don't have the background information to be like, this place is excellent, but I will say that they have a great roundup of newspaper articles.
Okay.
And that they are accurately citing them.
Well, thank you for collecting newspaper articles, at least. Solar storms.
Yes.
Yes.
And possibly much more, but I just don't have the...
Possibly much more. Yes.
I haven't done the digging to be able to give the full Are We Doomed endorsement, which is not a real thing. Okay. So the Baltimore Sun. From twilight until 10 o'clock last night, the whole heavens were lighted by the aurora borealis, more brilliant and beautiful than had been witnessed for years before. The light streaks shot upwards from the horizon and varied in width and length and changed as long as the phenomenon was visible. It was a grand sight and was witnessed by thousands of persons, many of whom never saw the like before.
Wow.
And isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Because they were like, yeah, it's the Northern Lights. It's in Baltimore.
Yeah. It's kind of lovely too, just to be like, the science happened and it was pretty, it's like,
yeah, exactly.
A nice reaction. I like it.
Exactly. And that's how a lot of them are, luminosity and electricity in the sky, or the aurora borealis, or the northern lights. And then there are these sort of reports from various places of the telegraph went on a fritch. There was a telegraph fire at the same time, but there's not this enormous panic from the newspapers.
Right.
But okay, here's the thing that's really interesting, if I may, about the newspapers.
Please, yeah.
Okay, I am interested in, are we going to have another one of these things? Because the thing that happened in Quebec was half the power and maybe half or less the speed of Carrington. And it wiped out electricity in one place for quite a bit of time. The northern lights are an indicator of how powerful a storm is. I told you that we had talked to the former chief scientist of NASA. He very proudly, while I'm talking to him, I'm talking to him about this, we're talking about Carrington and whatever. And he's like, this is like his background in science. He's a magnetosphere scientist, which I didn't know was the thing. And all of a sudden he says to me, I'm also a Civil War reenactor.
Wow.
It was not the sentence that I expected to hear.
We contain multitudes.
Yeah. People have hobbies. And
That's right.
So he says, I'm a Civil War reenactor. I'm like, okay. And he goes, do you know why that matters? I was like, no, I don't know why that matters. And he says, well, I reenact the Balloon Corps. And the Balloon Corps was a Civil War unit of the Union Army. They were volunteers that were already aeronauts. They were ballooners. And they would go up for the Union Army to do reconnaissance and to do what was now called artillery spotting, to be able to say, go fire there. So this scientist, Jim Green, former NASA chief scientist, is doing his research for his Civil War reenactment. And he's digging through the newspaper archives to figure out more about the ballooners.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. And the way he describes it to me, he's reading through and he comes to this article just as he's digging through and trying to figure out what did these guys do before the war from 1859. And he starts reading one of these articles, the whole sky appeared to undulate something like a field of grain in a high wind. I mean, I don't know if he read that particular one, but like that's, he's reading about the northern lights and something goes off in his head where he says, oh, this is Carrington. And because all the newspapers at the time are not saying, oh, this is the Carrington event. It wasn't called that yet, right, on the day of.
Right.
But he's also realizing that every newspaper that's reported it tells you where the aurora has appeared.
Yeah.
So, you saw the aurora in 2024 in Seattle. My parents could have seen it in Northern California. I think it was even visible a little bit further south than that. Quebec one, I think, went down to Mexico, maybe. Somewhere around there, which is like, pretty darn far.
Yeah.
He gets a bunch of interns from NASA into the Library of Congress, has them start digging through newspaper archives and basically writing down the time that it was seen, the color that it was seen, where was it, and what's the newspaper, which tells you the location. And he plots this all out.
Wow.
And he gets this graph. Essentially, it creates an animation of Carrington. And it goes all the way down from Canada through the United States, all the way down to Colombia in South America. And people in Colombia, South America, could see the northern lights.
Wow.
Which gives you a sense of how powerful this thing is. But what he said to me is, here's why this matters. Because we already knew Carrington was powerful. We have like more sophisticated measurements of what it probably was today than, looking at old newspaper articles that were like,
right.
What was that? Pretty northern lights. Is because it's this blood red sky. And you can go through earlier histories before there was electricity, before there was even telegraph, before anybody knew what they were looking at, before anything was going to be affected by them, and say, okay, where are there other reports of blood red skies in these sort of low latitude environments?
Yeah.
And so he says, so we go through older records. Here, we go through Chinese records. We go through Japanese records. We go through the Babylonian records.
Wow.
And what he says is, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's all over the place.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Because we wouldn't have had a structure like electricity to go out. We would only have that sky to tell us, what was going on. And of course, we would have interpreted it in a myriad of...
in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, probably more on the spiritual side. Yeah.
Which is like why they're written down, right? People were like, well, that was weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a cool project. I would have loved to have been part of that. I love a newspaper assignment. It's a great,
that speaks
great
to you.
Joy. Yeah. It speaks to my nerdiness. More after this. And now back to the show.
So like Chelsey, I don't think I was thinking about this when I was looking. I was like, oh, the electricity of the time exploded and that electricity was pretty pathetic, compared to the electricity that we have today. But you have some thoughts on what the telegraph was and what it represented at the time. It sounds like it was like much bigger and more important and significant than, I don't know, anything I've considered.
Sure. I mean, yeah, as I said, the telegraph is just one of those things that is so earth-shatteringly different than any other piece of technology before it that I just think it can't be overstated, this thing that we had at that time. And the reason I brought up the spiritualists is and this is going to be, I talk about this quite frequently, everyone, I know, but I love spiritualism. I love the rise of this kind of religious movement of talking to the dead. And the interesting part of that, and why I think the Carrington event happening when it did, coming really close to maybe about 10 years after the spiritualist movement had really started to foment in culture, is that there's a lot of, at least theory, I think there's a lot of evidence also to suggest that the telegraph itself kind of kicked off the form that this new religion would take, because the Fox sisters, they were two girls. Ultimately, they were pranksters. It wouldn't come out for years, but they taught themselves how to use the joints in their feet to knock on wall or to knock on the floor and kind of throw the sound. It's really gross and weird, but they were able to convince a lot of people that they were communicating with a dead person, and they were able to create this coding system that they could actually get these different dead people to talk to them. And that's where we get mediums, right? That's where we get what we know today as a seance. It comes out of this movement, and it was happening concurrently with the telegraph. So if you think about the original form of spiritualism being knocking and clicks that form a code, you can't help but relate it to the technology at the time. And we see this again, with the telephone. It connects to when we started hearing voices, right? Or we started having mediums that could speak for the dead. So these disembodied voices were suddenly coming out. And you can kind of track the way that we relate to the paranormal through the types of technology that we are developing at the time. And so I just think, when I first learned about the Carrington event, and maybe if it were a little bit later than this, when spiritualism was a lot more ingrained in society, in the later 19th century, more people would have reacted to it in a paranormal way, because if your technology is bursting into flames or working without a battery or without the charge, that's classic stuff. That's ghost movie stuff, right? It's I just think that it's so fascinating that there wasn't any and we don't know, because of course we have the newspapers. That's what we have. We know that newspaper reporters are generally speaking as factually as possible. I mean, not always, but generally speaking, there is a sense that you are not reporting on things that are too out there, or at least that would be the hope. And so we don't know what people were saying in churches. We don't know what people were saying in things that would never be recorded. So we can't really know. We don't know what the seance rooms were saying. I bet the seance rooms were abuzz with this event. But I just think it's fascinating that with so much philosophy attached to technology and so much paranormal and spiritual thinking attached to these incredible lines that were connecting people for the first time in a way that itself was paranormal, right? It's like, it's paranormal to talk to somebody across the country. That's magic. That's not technology to people who don't understand technology. That's magic. And so to have this kind of magical event occur, plus a blood red sky, I mean, it just feels like that's a recipe for something, but here we are. Reason prevailed for the most part, which I really do appreciate. So good job, people of 1859. You did well.
Most of them are like, most of the papers are like, it's probably the Aurora. The Aurora seems to be involved. Yeah. Like, hey, the Aurora's electrical. That's what this shows.
Neat. It's just, and again, I do think the response would be different today, but maybe only because everyone can record their experience in a way that they couldn't in the past, right? We'd have like tweets and we'd have YouTube videos and we'd have, whatever. We'd have people who could record what they were thinking it was, It
reminds me, I know you've covered this, but of the little green men, I guess the little gray men, right? When people the first descriptions of that and how that comes about, and then how it becomes so many more sightings of it after people already have this conception. When you've been told that something that you see in the sky that's unexplained is aliens, then more people saying it's aliens. And I'm talking like very specifically about that early story. I know you've covered this of the couple.
Are you talking about Barney and Betty Hill? Yeah. So yes, we have covered them. We haven't covered the little green men as well. Maybe we did. It's been a long time, but we did cover in the same vein. And this is also something we talk about a lot because this was like one of the driving stories behind me creating the show. Comes from a Carl Jung book about UFOs and talking about how the first UFO that was seen was described as moving like a saucer across water, but it got printed as looking like a saucer. Yeah. And thus, the template was completely different from what actually ended up being seen over and over and over and over and over again by people. And that influence can't really be denied to me, that like psychic influence of that first story.
Well, it's really interesting too, just to think about the more we can explain things, the more maybe we search for an explanation for the unexplained.
Interesting.
And in a world where there's more unexplained, maybe there's less need to say, well, what's the explanation for that?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's absolutely true. So in terms of solar storms, in the spirit of your show, are we in trouble? Do we need to worry about solar storms? Do we need to take action? What do you think? What is your vision of the future when it comes to this particular potential disaster?
Okay. For maybe the second time in the history of my, again, admittedly somewhat short research for this show, I mean, we're at this point a little over a dozen episodes in. This is something I had not heard of, and I do not love what we're seeing.
Okay.
Basically, what we find is that solar storms of a Carrington size likely happen on the level of centuries.
Okay.
Maybe as small as averaging every 150 years or 200 years, maybe 500 years. But what that means is that if you go back to that moment when the telegraph is first developing, and that's when we had the last one, and then we built all of our society dependent on electricity since then.
Yeah.
And we have happened to not have one while we were doing that, is like sort of amazing. It's not great. It's not just me saying that. The national academies, the prestigious scientists who advise the government, did a report back in 2012 that estimated trillions of dollars in damage if a Carrington-level storm were to happen today. The coronal mass ejection, the piece of sun blasting out, hitting satellites, can do tons of damage to satellites. It can drop satellites. And so NASA actually in 2014, did a blog post that likened a Carrington-level event to a civilization-ending asteroid.
Ooh.
However.
Jeez. Okay.
However.
Right. I like this, however.
There's like a really simple solution to not having your entire electric grid melted by a massive solar storm. And Chelsey, do you know what that solution is?
I haven't a clue.
You just turn it off. You just turn off the electricity.
Okay. You turn it off like before it happens or after it happens? But
before
can
it happens,
you know?
You turn it off.
Can you know it's going to happen?
Well, this is the thing. In the same branch of government as the regular weather service, there is a office called the Space Weather Prediction Center, and they monitor solar activity. It's like, Weather Channel for the sun. And they tell grid operators, and they tell satellite operators, and they tell astronauts, they tell FEMA when stuff is coming in. The thing is that right now, that warning system does not appear to be, might not be fast enough to catch a storm moving at the speed of a Carrington. It doesn't seem good, although there's different levels of debate about, could they catch it in time? Because if they can catch it in time and, grid operators can do a couple of things, basically, if it's in the spring, maybe it's okay because people are using less electricity. And so that current hits and you can distribute it more easily. But if it's in the summer and everybody's running electricity and you're already at capacity and then this thing hits, it just, overloads everything. Yeah. There's no capacity to absorb more. So there's some debate about that. The thing is that you could upgrade our ability to catch these storms by putting some new satellites that are purpose-built for it.
Okay.
The person at the Space Weather Prediction Center told me that she would really love some satellites that are closer to the sun, that are just sort of, pointed in that area. So did the former chief scientist of NASA. He said the same thing. But the other thing that you can do is the thing that all of our homes and businesses already have, which is that we have circuit breakers, right?
Right.
Your home is designed that if you demand too much electricity from it, the breaker hits and you're fine.
And you're fine.
Right? That's why it exists.
Yes.
So there is a version of this that the power grid could adopt. It's specifically built for what's called geomagnetic current. So it's not for every day, but basically it's the equivalent of a circuit breaker. And you could just essentially put those in.
We don't have that. Why don't we have that? That seems very important and very simple. Maybe it's not simple, but it sounds important.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
That was very much my takeaway.
Okay.
The answer that I got to that plaintive question of why don't we have that, is that essentially we built so much of our electric grid and our electric society not really realizing these things happen or at the scale that they happen, which is interesting to go back to the newspaper articles from 1859. And they're like, oh, look at that aurora and look at our telegraphs being fried.
Yes.
And somehow, starting back then, we still didn't build with that connection in mind.
Right. Oh, God. It's so frustrating when it feels like there is a solution that feels really as simple as what happens in our own home, and yet we can't really implement that. Is it that it's too costly? Is it that we would have to overhaul the systems that we have in some way? Or did you get a sense of why? Is it because you said we built it without that in mind? So is that the reason that it seems difficult to achieve that now?
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you think about, I'm in Los Angeles and we have a lot of buildings that were built, before the 1970s or the 1980s, before the Northridge earthquake. So they just weren't built with certain standards.
Sure.
And sometimes they're required to do seismic retrofitting so they could withstand bigger earthquakes. And sometimes they're not. And it's a big expense to go back and mess with those buildings later. And it's probably something we should do because we know that, we're due for more earthquakes.
Right.
And this is sort of similar. I also think, though, there are threats to society, to humanity. And as we get better as society and as humanity at doing the science and learning these things, we recognize them. And so the flip side of this is that we are becoming more and more aware, this is the thing that happened in 1859. This is how big it was. This is what it did. This is what it could do to us today. And I think that as that recognition grows, urgency grows as well to do something. So I mentioned there's the National Academy's report from the early 2010s. And I think that starts to create pressure. There's still discussions ongoing about what to do and how to balance the the cost and also just the engineering challenges of it, because it's not quite as simple as like just
right, of course,
a one-size-fits-all circuit breaker. I think also there is something about just our general awareness of this. Today we demand that buildings are built with earthquake standards in Los Angeles. And when we have events that are bad that happen in other places, we see earthquakes, like in Venezuela, and it's horrible. And it renews the concentration that, we need to do something about it.
Yeah.
That happened in 1989 in Quebec. It did change a little bit of the awareness of what we need. And so I think that awareness is growing. I would like it to grow faster because it does seem like these things happen a lot more quickly than some of the other threats that we look at.
Right.
But also the solution doesn't, in the grand scheme of things, seem that hard. We're not talking about multinational nuclear diplomacy. We're talking about an off button.
Right. And, I'm thinking of I have an app that will, hopefully, allegedly alert me of an earthquake, a handful of seconds before it happens. And that could be the difference between, a really devastating experience and, just getting under that table quick enough, And
then going to get all that food you prepped.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You better believe it. And then I put on my little CERT helmet and I go out and I start surveying all the damage in the neighborhood. That's what we were trained to do. But yeah, and then my friend Eric, speaking of my community emergency response team training, taught me about Faraday bags, which I kind of knew about. But, he was like, just go get yourself a metal trash can and pop an old laptop in there. And at first I was like, this seems like really kooky, but then after this, I'm like, Eric, my man, you knew what you were talking about. And he was a really smart guy. And I feel like I learned a lot from him. And I learned a lot from you today.
In case this is helpful, I was told that our cell phones are probably fine, even a Carrington level event. I was so busy trying to get my head wrapped around the other science. I don't fully understand why, but I think it's really the power supply. It's the big wires. Okay. The thing that we're worried about is the electric grid, the transformers exploding, the big stuff. And, satellites out in space exposed to the massive particles and magnetism and radioactivity, all that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. I don't know if you need the laptop in the Faraday cage. I'm not saying no to Eric. I just don't know.
We don't say no to Eric.
We need the grid in the Earth in a Faraday cage. Maybe.
Yes. Right. And maybe that's just better for not being surveyed by the government. Another
there you go.
former conspiracy theory coming true. But let me ask you this as we're closing out. We've talked about the conceit of your show. We've talked about it, in this episode. But from making this show about these potential or, overblown doomsday scenarios, there is a line through your show, I think, of hope. So what is something you can leave us with that will instill rather than fear, maybe some positive feelings in our audience about
totally.
It doesn't have to be about solar storms, but just about in general what you cover.
Well, I would say that in some ways the solar storm one is unusual for us because it did catch me really off guard. The degree to which I was like, oh, this seems more concerning than I thought.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of concerning stuff out there. But one of the things that we like to do, and I think this again dovetails with a lot of what you're doing, Chelsey, is that people have a long history of thinking that they're doomed. Mm-hmm. And the way one guest put it to me, every generation has something that they believe will doom them. Mm-hmm. And we have an episode where we go back and look at just the 20th century, and just a few times people thought they were doomed. They thought they were going to be doomed because we weren't going to be able to grow enough food for the population that was emerging. They thought we were going to be doomed because robots were going to kill us all. They thought we were going to be doomed by nuclear war. Mm-hmm. And for different reasons, in each of those cases, those dooms didn't come true.
Right.
And the only reason that we're here is because these dooms keep not happening.
Right.
And I don't think it's a matter of them not happening just because we wish them away or because of our, feverish, hysterical minds. Sometimes it's that. But also it's because we do actually have the ability to make decisions that change what would have been our future.
Right.
And so a really good example of that is nuclear war, where people were predicting just as soon as multiple nations had the bomb, they were predicting a future where it was conventional warfare, but with bigger bombs that destroyed everything. And that certainly could have been the case. They were predicting, Newsweek was predicting 50 nations with nuclear weapons
by
1960. And it's like, well, yeah, why wasn't that the case? It's because there was a lot of work. There's a lot of diplomatic work, a lot of choices that were made to not have that future. And so I think that gives me a lot of hope, actually. And I find that actually, as I've been doing this series, I would say I'm normally a glass half empty type of person.
Mm-hmm.
But I have found myself more optimistic than certainly I would have expected as I've dug into these things.
That's great to hear. You know what, everyone? I think you know where to go to get a little bit of optimism because, we try to be optimistic too. It feels like doomsday every day right now, doesn't it? And I mean, I don't know. It does feel like that. And it is comforting to know that it has always felt like that. And I guess we're just going to have to wait and see and take little actions that we can each take to try to add up to a change. So thank you so much, Ben. This was so interesting.
Oh my God, thank you.
I didn't know where this was going to go. And I think we just went to some really great places. So thank you so much for being on the show and for doing the work that you do.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
This was American Hysteria. Make sure you subscribe to Ben's show, Are We Doomed, wherever you get your podcasts. If you love American Hysteria and want to support our show and help make sure that we can continue to create it, you can go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get ad-free episodes and bonus content, including Hysteria Home Companion, the other podcast that I make with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we cover and stories that we know that you'll love. There's a huge back catalog and other types of bonus episodes as well, so go check it out at patreon.com/American Hysteria or by subscribing on Apple Plus. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can pick up some of our merch. 100% of those profits go to the Samir Project, a Palestinian-led mutual aid group in Gaza. You can also leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or one you've heard recently. We might do an entire investigation about it. Another great way to help out our show is to leave us a 5-star review on whatever app you use. And you can follow us on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius-Smith. This episode has additional editing by Kaylee Jasperson. And I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.